Under the blinding stage lights of America's Got Talent, a shy 14-year-old Filipino boy named Enzo clutches a worn-out guitar, its wood chipped from years of practice under the flicker of a single light bulb back home. When Simon Cowell asks, "Why did you choose Hotel California?" Enzo smiles softly and says, "Because my dad used to sing it before he left for work overseas." The audience goes silent. His voice trembles at first, but then pure magic fills the room. The sun was already sinking behind the rows of tin rooftops in a small coastal town in Batangas, Philippines. The air was heavy with the smell of grilled fish and the laughter of children chasing after makeshift paper kites. Amidst the hum of tricycles and vendors calling out their last sales for the day, a soft strumming of guitar strings began to rise above the noise, calm, pure, and almost magical. It was Enzo, a 14-year-old boy with gentle eyes and calloused fingers, that told stories of long practice sessions and humble beginnings. He sat on a worn wooden crate beside his mother's food cart, the same place he returned to every evening after school. His guitar was old, a gift from his father before leaving to work overseas. The varnish chipped and the strings slightly rusted, yet it produced the kind of sound that came straight from the heart. "Anak, let's sing the old one tonight," his mother said, wiping sweat from her forehead with the edge of her apron. "It brings good luck," Enzo smiled. "Hotel California?" She nodded, and the two shared a knowing glance. It wasn't just a song. It was their song, the one his father used to hum as he packed his bags for another contract abroad. Each note carried the ache of distance, the hope of return, and the quiet strength of those who wait. As Enzo's voice floated into the evening air, people began to gather. Jeepney drivers paused between routes. Children stopped their play to listen. Even tired workers heading home slowed down, caught by the sincerity in his tone. There was something unexplainable about his singing, as if he wasn't just performing, but reaching out to anyone who had ever loved and lost, hoped and waited. Coins clinked into the small box beside his guitar case. Some left bills, others a simple smile. But it wasn't the money that made Enzo's eyes shine. It was the kindness. Each gesture felt like a tiny affirmation that what he was doing mattered. Sometimes, during quieter nights, he would sing alone after his mother closed the cart. The stars above seemed to listen, and he'd whisper, "One day, Papa will hear me sing this on TV." It was a dream too big for a boy from the slums, but he believed it anyway. Life wasn't easy. The rain would flood their small shack, and some nights they'd go to sleep with only rice and soy sauce. But Enzo never complained. Music became his refuge, his escape, and his gift back to a world that often felt unkind. Neighbors often said, "That boy's voice will take him places." Enzo would only laugh shyly, his eyes lowering in humility. Deep down, though, he held on to that hope, not for fame or fortune, but to someday give his mother a life without worry. And so, beneath the golden glow of a single street light, Enzo kept singing, unaware that his voice, recorded by a stranger passing by, was about to change everything. The next morning began like any other in Enzo's small neighborhood. Roosters crowing before dawn, the aroma of garlic rice drifting through the air, and his mother humming softly as she prepared breakfast. Enzo sat by the window, strumming his guitar in gentle rhythm, still lost in the memory of the night before. He had no idea that his world was about to shift in a way he could never have imagined. Across the ocean, a viral spark had already ignited. The night before, an American tourist, a middle-aged woman named Rachel, had stopped by Enzo's street stall to buy dinner. Captivated by his voice, she'd taken out her phone and recorded him singing Hotel California under the dim glow of the streetlight. She uploaded the video with a simple caption, "Found the voice of an angel in the streets of the Philippines. Remember this boy's name, Enzo." By morning, the video had spread like wildfire. Shares turned into thousands, then millions. Comments flooded in. "He deserves a stage." This gave me chills. Someone get him on America's Got Talent. But in Enzo's little home, none of this had reached him yet. The internet cafe down the road was the only connection they had to the wider world. And Enzo rarely went unless he was helping classmates with music homework. That afternoon, as he helped his mother pack boxes of skewers, a neighbor came running, breathless, holding a cracked smartphone. "Enzo, your video, it's everywhere." He frowned, confused. "What video?" "You singing, look." The moment he saw himself on screen, his shy smile, his voice echoing through 1,000 comments. His heart stopped. He watched as numbers climbed by the second. His mother stood beside him, hand over her mouth, eyes already welling up. "Is this real?" Enzo whispered it was. And soon, proof arrived in the form of an email. Rachel, the tourist, had contacted the producers of America's Got Talent. Within days, a formal invitation was sent. They wanted Enzo to audition in person. That night, Enzo sat quietly beside his mother, holding the printed letter in trembling hands. The air was still, but his heart raced. "Ma," he said softly, "what if I'm not good enough?" His mother smiled through tears, cupping his face. "You sing from your heart, Anak. That's all the world needs to hear." When he boarded the plane weeks later, it was the first time he'd ever left the Philippines. He pressed his face against the window as the island below grew smaller and smaller. The fishing boats, the food stalls, the place where dreams were usually too far to reach. But as clouds swallowed the land, Enzo realized something. Maybe dreams weren't meant to stay close. Maybe they were meant to fly. And somewhere across the world, in a studio filled with lights and cameras, destiny was waiting, with Simon Cowell among those ready to listen. The stage lights were brighter than anything Enzo had ever seen. They shimmered against the gold letters of America's Got Talent, bouncing off the polished floor like sunlight on the sea. The crowd was a blur of faces, hundreds of people whispering, clapping, waiting. And in the middle of it all stood a trembling 14-year-old boy from the Philippines, holding a chipped guitar that had seen more struggle than fame. Simon Cowell leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Enzo," he said softly, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm from the Philippines." A murmur ran through the audience, and some smiled, some cheered. Simon continued, "And what are you going to sing for us today?" Enzo took a deep breath, fingers brushing the guitar strings. "Hotel California. It was my dad's favorite song." The room went silent. Even the usual hum of the studio seemed to fade away. As he began to play, the first few notes trembled, but something in his tone carried weight, like every strum was a story and every lyric a memory. The melody poured out, tender yet strong, weaving through the air like a prayer for all who had ever hoped for something more. By the time he reached the chorus, his nerves melted away. His voice deepened, stretched, soared. Every word came alive, and not just sung but felt. The crowd leaned in closer. Some audience members clasped their hands. Others wiped away tears they couldn't explain. On the judges' panel, Heidi closed her eyes. Sophia whispered, "He's so young." But that soul. Halfway through, Enzo's voice cracked. A tiny imperfect break. He froze, heart pounding, terrified he'd ruined everything. But then, the audience erupted in cheers, clapping in rhythm, urging him on. The sound lifted him higher than he'd ever been before. He smiled, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes, and sang the rest with everything he had. That small break, that moment of vulnerability, Beois, became the heartbeat of his performance. As the final note rang out, his voice hung in the air for a long, sacred second. Then silence, and then thunder. The audience rose in a standing ovation, their applause crashing like waves. Enzo stood frozen, eyes wide, unable to process what he'd just done. Simon Cowell didn't speak at first. He simply sat there, motionless, lips pressed together, eyes glistening. Then, in a rare moment, Simon smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Enzo," he finally said, voice steady but soft. "I've heard that song hundreds of times, but never like this." The other judges nodded, speechless. The boy bowed, clutching his guitar, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. He wasn't thinking of the lights or the fame, only of his mother watching back home, maybe crying in front of a flickering TV screen. For Enzo, that night wasn't just a performance. It was proof that music, pure, honest, human, could stop time itself. The applause seemed endless. Enzo stood in the center of the stage, breathless, clutching his guitar as golden lights shimmered across the audience. He couldn't stop smiling. Not the kind of smile you wear for cameras, but the kind that blooms when a dream you've carried all your life suddenly becomes real. Simon Cowell still hadn't spoken again. He was leaning back in his chair, hands clasped, studying the boy with a rare, reflective look. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, as if even Simon didn't want to break the spell. Finally, he leaned forward. "Enzo," Simon began slowly, "I've been doing this show for a long time, and every once in a while someone walks in and reminds me why we do this." The crowd hushed. Enzo blinked, unsure whether to breathe. "You didn't just sing," Simon continued. "You told a story. You made every person here feel something. That's what true artistry is." Enzo's lower lip trembled. He wanted to thank him, but the words got lost somewhere between his heart and his throat. Then Simon looked at the other judges, nodding slightly, as if he already knew what he was about to do. He stood slowly and said, "You know what, Enzo? I think we've heard enough." Before Enzo could process the words, Simon slammed his hand down. Bam! The golden buzzer lit up the stage. In an instant, a storm of golden confetti exploded from above, swirling through the air like rain made of dreams. The crowd screamed in joy, the judges stood, and the cameras zoomed in on the small Filipino boy who had just earned one of the most coveted honors in the show. Enzo froze for a moment, overwhelmed. Then he dropped to his knees, covering his face with his hands as the confetti fell around him. Tears streamed down his cheeks. For a second, it didn't feel real, as if he was watching someone else live his dream. Simon walked up onto the stage and gently placed a hand on Enzo's shoulder. "That," he said softly, "was unbelievable. Don't ever forget what you just did tonight." Enzo looked up, voice shaking. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much," Simon smiled. "You've just made your country very, very proud." Somewhere backstage, crew members clapped and even the camera operators smiled. But in that sea of noise, Enzo thought only of one person, his mother, sitting thousands of miles away in front of an old TV, probably crying harder than he was. Back in his hometown, neighbors gathered around the food stall, watching the moment unfold live. When the confetti fell on screen, cheers erupted through the streets. His mother pressed her hand to her heart and whispered, "You did it, Anak. You did it." As Enzo stood under the golden rain, he realized something powerful. This wasn't just his victory. It belonged to every kid who had ever dreamed from a place where dreams seemed impossible. That night, the boy from the streets of Batangas became a symbol of hope, proof that even the humblest voices could echo across the world. The next morning, Enzo woke up in his hotel room to the sound of hundreds of notifications buzzing on his phone. He rubbed his eyes, half convinced it was still a dream. But when he opened his messages, his heart swelled. Thousands of people from all over the world had written to him. "You made me cry, Enzo. Thank you for reminding me what real music feels like. Your voice healed something in me I didn't know was broken. I watched with my daughter. Now she wants to sing, too." Each message was like a beam of light. Enzo never imagined that one song, one moment could reach so many hearts. Later that day, he was invited to speak in a post-performance interview for the show. Sitting under soft studio lights, wearing the same humble outfit he had worn on stage, Enzo looked nervous but determined. The interviewer smiled warmly and asked, "Enzo, you've become an overnight sensation. Millions of people around the world are calling your performance one of the most emotional in AGT history. How does that feel?" Enzo lowered his gaze, shy as always. "It feels unreal," he said softly. "But I didn't sing to be famous. I sang because that song reminds me of home, of my mom and my dad who works far away. I just wanted them to hear me." The interviewer leaned forward. "If you could say something to your mother right now, what would it be?" Enzo took a deep breath, blinking back tears. "I'd tell her, 'We made it, Ma, and soon I'll build you a small house so you'll never have to sell food in the rain again.'" The studio fell silent. The cameramen lowered their heads, and even the host's voice broke slightly when she said, "That's beautiful, Enzo." The clip went viral within hours. News outlets around the world picked it up. Headlines read, "Filipino teen wins hearts with his humility and golden voice. AGT's most touching audition yet, a song that changed a family's life." Back home, Enzo's mother watched that same interview on a borrowed phone. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the kind of pride that fills the heart until it hurts. Neighbors gathered around, cheering, clapping, crying, and as if his success belonged to all of them. A week later, Enzo received a letter from a charity organization offering to help fund his education and his mother's small home. The kindness of strangers, the power of compassion, had turned a simple dream into something much greater. a movement of hope. When he returned to the AGT stage weeks later for the semifinals, Enzo looked out at the crowd and smiled. "This stage changed my life," he said. "But it's the people's kindness that changed my heart." He lifted his guitar, ready to sing once more, not just for fame, but for gratitude. Because deep down, Enzo knew that the greatest music isn't heard by the ears. It's felt by the heart.